fairy tales that we know and have been told since we were kids they've had a lot of the edges rounded off of them, and we don't really want to tell that story. We're telling the stories that are the same raw, gritty, weird, gross fairy tales that people have been telling for centuries that we've sort of moved away from. And Bill does that as well. I mean, that's what's great about Fables, the comic book, is that you think you know these characters because we've all been told these stories, but he shows you a different side of it that is really fantastic to explore.
So I noticed playing what you have here at PAX that there really is not a lot of exposition. You're really jumping straight in, and if someone doesn't know about Fables, it's like, whoa, is that an intentional choice? Do you really want people who are not familiar with the comic to just have their minds blown?
Well, that's a fantastic compliment, because all I see is exposition as the writer, because we're definitely trying to seed what the story is. We're definitely trying to get you familiar with what the world is, because it's such a unique license, it's such a unique franchise. But I think we're actually in a place with a lot of other media, with Once Upon a Time, and you've got Grimm, and you've got a lot of movies coming out, Jack the Giant Slayer. So I think people are comfortable with fairy tales and tweaks on fairy tale stories. So we don't have to do the heavy lifting that maybe we would have 10 years ago if a game like this came out.
So you worked previously on The Walking Dead. That was probably maybe Telltale's last critically acclaimed, awesome game. What drew you guys to Fables as the next property to work with? That isn't necessarily an obvious follow-up to The Walking Dead for a lot of people.
Well, at the time that we signed The Walking Dead, we actually signed Fables as well, and they're both very well-selling comic books. I mean, they've both been consistently on the New York Times bestsellers list in comics and trades, so it's gone 100 issues deep, and the world is dynamic and interesting and is unique. It's a totally different take than what Walking Dead is, and I think we've all struggled with trying to make sure that this game has an identity, and it's its own thing, and it's not just iterative of what The Walking Dead is.
So how would you say, what would be your little elevator pitch, essentially, for people who played The Walking Dead to draw them to this world? It's like, if you like The Walking Dead, if you like these parts of The Walking Dead, come to Wolf Among Us.
The Wolf Among Us allows you to dictate a lot more of what you want to do. Lee is a character that is a bystander often. He is a guy that's tumbling down a hill, just grasping at anything he can to slow the fall. Bigby is the sheriff of Fabletown. He is the big bad wolf. He gets to dictate terms in a way that Lee never did. So it allows you to have that control, and really what the game boils down to is more the responsibility of that power and less about just struggling to survive.
So how do you strike that balance as a writer between giving the player enough choice to feel like they're really a part of the world, but also having the story go in the way that you want to over the course of these episodes?
Well, leaving that sort of negative space, leaving that... What's great about Telltale games is how much you bring to it, and giving you a character like Bigby who has a big swing. You can play him as sort of the guy who kicks a door in and demands answers, or the guy who investigates the case, or someone who's just going straight by the book, or just a nice guy, and it's relationship management. Having the ability to play your Bigby in the way that you're able to play your Lee allows you to have ownership over it and tell the story with us rather than have us tell it to you.
So, what happened at Telltale, man? I mean, you're getting critically acclaimed and stuff, but all of a sudden these games are all dark, man. There's fighting. What happened to Back to the Future? What happened to, Monkey Island and stuff?
Well, the thing is, these are licenses that have their own identity, and people who read the Fables comics would know that this actually fits the tone of the comic. And so that's not to say that we can't do light things in the future. Poker Night 2 came out. A fun game, and not nearly as dark and foreboding as these two. So it has to be true to the world. I mean, we can't just take Fables and make it something it isn't, and that's probably the main thrust.
And how much care do you guys take to make sure that you fit the setting perfectly? How much work is done just to make sure that, how much writing do you edit to make sure that it fits in with the established world?
Because it's canonical and because it leads straight into the Fables comic books, it would be completely problematic for me as a writer for it not to be in the voice of the characters that people have known for 100 issues. And we don't want people marching on our offices with picks and fire to have us run out of there. So I think it's always been important to make sure that people who are Fables fans are really happy with what we've done, and while still making it something that's accessible for someone who doesn't know Fables as well.